They quiet down, you know, they never quiet down if you just wait for them. All right, this is a book of short stories I put out a few years ago. This one's called $1 a Day. And it's not an actual battle from the Civil War, but it's set as a skirmish that took place in the Shenandoah Valley. Okay. Silas is not asleep this crisp early morning of October 8th, 1862, but he's close to it. Yesterday evening, his unit came to the rear after a day of intense skirmishing in light but constant rain over a square mile of rolling countryside. He had slept until midday and gone on rear watch at the crest of a short ridge. A bird's song nudges him gently from the edge of slumber. Chilled pain wrenches his bandage and his palm to the ankle, shaking him fully awake. But he's not been hurt. He's not hurt. He ponders. The day vanishes. Hazy auras of tree lines peek through a gap in the tangled vines and weeds that choke the garrison fence against which he leans. Stars have supplanted the clouds. Starlight has tempered the blackness. Behind him, the first wisp of dawn struggle against the night. Before him, images begin to sharpen. A rich pasture cascades over a 40-yard slope into a level glen of 100 yards, and then fades into a line of hardwoods. The narrow stream divides the view. There's no battle here. There are no corpses, no wailing wounded. There's peace on this, the southwestern, the rear side of his regimental, on the right flank of his division. The dawn strengthens. Sounds of wind whishing through leaves are steady. Sounds of birds chirping in trees are sporadic. Sounds of men shouting, screaming, and moaning, guns blaring, shells exploding, and bayonets slashing are missing. Smells of crisp autumn air cleansed with rain moving in from the southwest are powerful. Smells of wet earth, leaves no longer fresh but not yet decaying, and wool clothing that remains damp, though no longer soaked, are still present but less pervasive. Smells of powder, blood, burnt flesh, and scorched earth are not here. Sights of clear light blue sky now dominate the southwest horizon and point in overhead. Sights of clouds blackened throughout save a narrow band of pure white. Outer rings of crimson and sunbeams stabbing through the fringes retreat into the eastern horizon behind. Before him, sights of dark green, shin-deep, moist air wave in the wind and glisten in the dawn's rays. Sights of amber and crimson leaves displaced from trees that still abound with them bluster over the fields. Sights of angry, determined, terrified soldiers are absent. Silas shifts to his left, peers through the fence foliage gap at what lies to his right, and is greeted with more holy peace. Morning birds flock over the edge of the field, dart over and into the woods. A deer sips water from the brook. Sunlight sparkles off the wet grass. A barn sits at the far edge of the pasture. Silas shifts to his right to survey the left rear edge of his encampment, the far extremity of his division state, and is greeted with horror. Rows of blue uniforms mounted on strong steeds, sabers drawn, are barely concealed by the edge of the woods. He shifts further, stretches, and finally dares to sneak a quick look over the top of the vegetation-encrusted fence. There are dozens, possibly 100, and he can only see the front of the first rank jutting out of the woods. He grabs his musket and scampers backwards on his hands and knees for some 10 feet until he is far enough below the crest to safely stand without being seen, and then turns and runs across the flattened crest of the ridge toward his unit. He finds the inner guard just this side of his compatriots who are up and stirring. Yanks, cavalry, 2 or 3 platoons, maybe more behind us. At that moment, burst of Yankee cannon blast from woods in front of them, opposite the attacking cavalry. Sergeants and officers leap about shouting commands. Men dart around, some half-dressed, as cannonade begins to fall in and about the camp. Explosions, ripping holes in the ground, tossing dirt, rocks, trees, equipment, and bodies into the air. Units quickly form, race to the northeast edge of the ridge, dive into shallow trenches behind short embankments. They gaze at puffs of smoke emerging from across the dell and gawk at lines of blue-clad infantry emerging from the distant woods at a trot to cross the 100 yards to get to the foot of his unit's small hill where they can swamp up the embankment through a hail of musket balls and into his colleagues. Salas searches frantically, finds a captain who is staring to his left at a distant knoll from which friendly artillery has begun to respond to the attack. Captain, Yankee cavalry behind us, platoons fixing to charge our rear if they haven't started already. The captain stares at him, bewildered. Are you sure? I saw them at the edge of the woods not 5 minutes ago. The captain is genteel, older, slow, an officer due to social status. Go tell the colonel. And he points to his right. Salas begins to sprint through the dusk, smoke, and shells toward the colonel. But over the ruckus, he recognizes his sergeant's yell. He looks and sees his unit hurry away from the front and scurry toward the other side of the ridge, the side he guarded last night. He dashes after them, reaches the rear of the ridge just as they are taking positions behind the fence, and falls in with them. In the narrow valley before him, 4 units of Union cavalry, each 3 ranks deep, are racing across the dell, already beginning to ascend the 40-yard slope. One of the units is directly in front of Salas. His sergeant screams, "Fire!" and a volley of musket balls fins the front rank noticeably, but not severely. Salas reloads. "Fix bayonets," his sergeant cries. Salas has no bayonet, finishes his load, rises, fires, and a horse not 5 yards away rears, spurting from its head, and drops, its rider diving off of his stricken mount and into the path of the next rank. Salas collapses behind the fence to frantically reload, his heart pounding, sweat rolling down his face as the soldier next to him, who has risen to fire, collides with a horse and rider scaling the fence, plummets beside them as the rider and horse buckle next to him, the horse whinnying and struggling and then rising to rush off. As that is happening, the cavalryman attempting to jump the fence several yards beyond him fails to do so, his horse crashing into the barrier and shattering the top rail while hurling the second rail into a nearby soldier as the rider tumbles the other way into a soldier who straight away drives a bayonet into the rider's neck. A horse further down the line balks at the railing, stops, and sends the rider over his head to smash into the ground. The displaced horseman starts to rise, only to be slammed by the next rank, making its jump. But most of the cavalrymen's horses scale the short fence successfully and race beyond. Salas ducks lower, inadvertently and fortunately avoiding a saber swipe of a rider whose horse jumps the fence just to his right. Screams, curses, pounding hooves, musket fire, swishing sabers, groans, smoke, sweat, the continuing roar of cannon and muskets from behind them, the blur of horses in the following ranks scaling the fence to join the first rank in their race into the rear of Salas's battalion. Yet Salas is focused exclusively on the rider who fell beside him, who now staggers to his knees. Then he springs to his feet as he draws his saber, crouches and glares back at Salus, who hoists his unloaded musket as a club, even as the cavalryman lunges at him and plunges his saber into Salus's gut. He cannot utter a noise. Agape, he stares into the mustached face of the young rider, grasps his blade with his right hand and squeezes it just as the Yankee jerks it back, deeply slicing Salus's hand. Chilled pain wrenches his abdomen and palm. He can utter no sound, cannot break eye contact with the bravado veteran, who grabs for his pistol, just as Salus's fellow soldier, the one knocked down by this brash young horseman beast, rises behind the Union soldier and mightily swings the butt of his musket to slam it against the Yankee's temple. The cavalryman staggers, then crumbles into a twisted heap, blood gushing over his crown and face and onto the ground around his head. All ranks of riders have cleared the fence and are galloping to slash at the rear of Salus's Confederates on the other side of the ridge. And Salus's sergeant orders his men to wheel about and attack their rear. But Salus drops to his knees, left hand pressed against the hole in his stomach, right palm cradled in the elbow of his left arm. His fellow soldier, who looks barely 16, races to him, gently runs his hand over Salus's shoulder and chest as he talks softly in a high-pitched backwoods twang. My name is Adam. What's your name? Salus, still unable to speak, stares over the mouth at the peach fuzz on Adam's furry face. You stay here while we whip this bunch, and then I'll come get you. You hear me? Salus manages a slight nod. Young Adam rises to race off, stops beside the motionless Union cavalryman, grabs his pistol, and brings it to Salus. Hang on to this just in case. Then he pivots and sprints off to join his fellow warriors. Maybe that's enough. This is kind of a long, short story. But,
well, does he survive? Does Salus survive?
He survives and starts reliving this every minute.
Oh.
Or he dies and goes wherever you relive it all the time. Or something of that nature. I'll leave that to the reader.
Wow.
How many more pages are there?